There are also other relevant instruments which are not mentioned in the FCTC, but which have relevant provisions. And the first one is the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action on Women's Rights, which expresses concern in the increasing use of tobacco among women and girls, and calls for governments to put in place measures to prevent this increasing use and to address the dangers posed by tobacco use on women and girls. And then we also have the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa. This is an African Union protocol that also applies throughout the continent. We are going to look at why it's necessary to have a special focus on women. And the first reason is, as I have already said, that smoking and tobacco use generally by women and girls is on the rise. And then tobacco farming in Africa largely relies on unpaid household labor by women and girls, and their unequal status makes them vulnerable to secondhand smoke both at home and at work. The other reason is that the media associates women's beauty and progress to tobacco use and therefore encourages them to begin and to continue using tobacco. Still examining why we need to focus on women and girls, food insecurity associated with tobacco farming disproportionately affects them, and existing women's rights mechanisms provide a strategic forum for advancing tobacco control. Tobacco control raises unique and important challenges in view of women's reproductive health roles, specifically green tobacco illness for women farmers, the health challenges posed by tobacco and contraceptives, and then tobacco and fetal health. And also because the FCTC calls for gender-specific tobacco control strategies. I'm now going to look at why we need to focus on children, and this is because they are especially targeted by tobacco companies, and they are beginning to smoke from very early ages. And due to poor implementation of the Tobacco Control Act, cigarettes are easily available to children, and then the risk of children being exposed to secondhand smoke is especially high. The other reason why we need to focus on children is because educating children is an important strategy in tobacco control and has an impact on their parents as well as future generation. And also because the risk of green tobacco sickness makes tobacco cultivation one of the worst forms of child labor. In terms of what can be done, tobacco control advocates should present shadow reports, and Veronica has already given us the case of Argentina and how they are using the international instruments to advance tobacco control. And the shadow reports should connect tobacco-related human rights violations to the rights enshrined in the specific instruments. The other thing that can be done is that tobacco control advocates should build the capacity of human rights advocates to address tobacco-related human rights violations in their work, because currently tobacco control advocates are working parallel to human rights advocates, even though much progress could be gained by synergy between the two sets of advocates. In terms of what can be done, referring specifically to the Beijing Platform for Action, out of the 12 critical areas of concern in the Beijing Platform for Action, a number of them are relevant to tobacco control, and specifically I'm talking about women and poverty, education and training of women, women's health, violence against women, women in power and decision making, human rights of women, women and environment, and the girl child. Examples of what can be done, examples of what has been done in terms of implementation of CEDAW. Veronica has already told us of the example from Argentina, so I'm not going to talk about it, to elaborate on it, especially because my time is up. I'd just like to conclude by giving an example of what has been done by the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And in its concluding observations in response to Armenia's report in 2000, the CRC encouraged Armenia to continue its efforts to provide children with accurate and objective information about tobacco use, and to protect them from harmful misinformation by imposing comprehensive restrictions on tobacco advertising. The importance of these recommendations by the committees is because the countries then put in place measures to implement the recommendations that come down from them. I'm now concluding because my time is up. I'd like to say that tobacco and human rights, tobacco control and human rights are complementary. As tobacco control advocates, we will not succeed in our work unless we embrace international, regional, and national human rights mechanisms. And also, as human rights advocates, we will not succeed in our work unless we recognize the human rights abuses caused by tobacco and incorporate tobacco control in everything we do. The human rights-based approach holds the key to success in tobacco control. Thank you.